Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. You're watching another edition of Break the Fake, where we debunk fake news and combat false narratives. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and let's get rolling. Now, you may have noticed a strange headline lately. The United States and Europe arguing over Greenland. And depending on who you ask, it sounds alarming, absurd, or like someone briefly forgot how maps work. But this isn't just about an icy, freezing plot of land. It's about what happens when allies get nervous at the same time and respond very differently. So from Washington's perspective, the Arctic is no longer just scenery. It's a front line. Greenland sits along missile warning routes as Russia expands its military presence and China probes for influence. US planners are looking at the next potential crisis and thinking, yeah, this won't wait for a consensus meeting and polite communiques. Now that instinct isn't irrational, it's what great powers do when geography starts mattering again. However, Europe isn't denying the threat. Denmark already hosts US military infrastructure in Greenland, Arctic risks are openly acknowledged, and NATO remains the backbone. For Europe, the disagreement is over pressure. When American rhetoric hints that sovereignty bends under strategic stress, Europe doesn't hear efficiency, it hears a precedent being tested. And that's why Trump's "buy Greenland" framing is so misleading, by the way. No modern legal system really allows a self-governing populated territory to be sold. The language is more leverage than policy. But leverage changes the atmosphere. Americans often treat maximalist talk as negotiation theater, while Europeans hear the same language and think, yeah, we've seen this movie before and it didn't really end well. So recently, this tension moved beyond rhetoric. Tariffs has entered the chat. Washington calls this statecraft, and Europe sees a line crossed. Trade penalties have become tools inside a security disagreement between allies. A signal was sent about who can impose costs inside the alliance and when. You can easily see why this tactic ruffles some feathers, to say the least. At the end of the day, strip away the popular yet oversimplified imperialism versus law framing, and the picture is clearer. US concerns reflect geopolitical change and is willing to do whatever it takes to address it. European concerns, meanwhile, reflect what happens when rules erode under pressure. It's strategic urgency colliding head-on with institutional restraint. And beneath it all is the quiet truth. Greenland's importance is rising, the status quo won't survive untouched, but everyone prefers cooperation to escalation. And everyone knows NATO cohesion matters more than symbolic wins. So this is where Greenland becomes a stress test, one that will measure how much strain the alliance can take before it starts rewriting itself. In the digital world, you no longer have to say anything to be heard. You do not even have to think anything to be quoted. Sometimes, all you need is a face. Ukrainian blogger Olga Loik learned this when she discovered herself on Chinese social media. There she was, smiling, confident, persuasive. Her face spoke Chinese about the friendship between China and Russia and advertised Russian goods. Now, Olga never said those words. She never supported this message. She could not even understand it without translation. Olga here is Ukrainian. Her family lives in a country against which Russia has been waging a full-scale war for almost 4 years now. In 2023, Olga created a YouTube channel where she talked about mental health. Now, nothing political, nothing geopolitical, just mental health. Then her subscribers started writing strange messages. They told her that they had seen her on Chinese social media. There, Olga was presented as a Russian woman. She spoke fluent Chinese, a language she never learned. She praised Russia as the best country in the world and explained that Russian women dream of going to China. Then came the pause for candy commercials. Dozens of videos with her AI clone appeared on Douyin and Bilibili, the Chinese version of TikTok and YouTube. One account called Imported Food from Natasha gathered more than 3 million followers. And this was not a one-off glitch. It is how the system works. China hosts a large shadow economy built on deepfakes, identity theft, and stolen personal data. This exists despite the fact that the country was one of the first to introduce AI regulations. In 2023, Chinese authorities arrested 515 people for artificial intelligence impersonation. In a market this large, that number might as well be statistical noise. At the same time, content promoting friendship without borders between Beijing and Moscow tends to survive moderation or even boosted by the algorithm. It does not matter whether it was created by the state or by a candy seller with access to a neural network. Now, the usual expert advice is to post less online. Fewer photos, fewer videos. Sounds reasonable until you remember this is the internet. Olga did fight back, however. She told her story, tracked her clones, and her supporters even helped her identify fake accounts, some of which have been removed. But the lesson is not about vigilance, it's about power. If artificial intelligence has already learned how to be Olga, the real question is, who will it decide to be next? And speaking of AI, a new combat division has appeared on social media, especially on TikTok. This unit does not exist in any battlefield. It exists entirely on screens. It wears pixelated camouflage, it does not freeze in the trenches, it does not flinch under fire, but it does confidently deliver the truth from the front lines straight into your feed. Now, these are AI-generated videos featuring characters presented as Ukrainian military personnel. Calm voices, familiar phrases, narratives that read like they were copied directly from Russian manuals. A snowy background, a tired face, a dramatic stare into the camera, and a standard script. Supplies are catastrophic, the government is ungrateful, society doesn't understand anything. A trench that never existed, but enough emotion to last 2 combat rotations. The videos circulate widely on Facebook, often without sources, without context, and with a very convenient emotional payload.
На нуль я потрапив, напевно, як і всі. Спіймали на вулиці 2 тижні так званого навчання, і ось я тут. Сподіваюсь, що хоча б місяць тут протримаюся.
Ось уже 4-й місяць у війську. Сам пішов, здався в ТЦК, бо сина спіймали і вимагали викуп. Грошей не було, я сам і здався, щоб його відпустили.
Ось вам приклад. Я на фронті вже 3,5 роки. Більшу частину часу на нулі. 3 поранення. За весь час навіть медалі не дали. А наш командир, який сидить за 50 кілометрів від нуля, вже весь в орденах. Отака от справедливість.
2 світи. В одному депутати жирують, п'ють шампанське по $500 і танцюють на кістках. А в іншому хлопці радіють одній пляшці води і сухпайку на 3, які скинули на позицію з дрона.
For added credibility, the authors rely on pseudo-realistic visuals, synthesized voices, and maximum drama. But if you look carefully, the cracks start to show. Strange unit patches, a universal uniform without any identifying marks, faces that look just a little bit too perfect. But TikTok is built for fast feelings, not slow, deliberate thinking. The calculation is simple. The viewer must believe before there is time to question. Russian propaganda keeps proving the same point. When real soldiers do not say the right words, you can just generate them. AI soldiers do not demand pay, they do not ask uncomfortable questions, they always say exactly what they are told. There's only one problem. They exist only on your screen. Real Ukrainian soldiers are not filming in TikTok studios, they're on real front lines. And the difference between them and these digital heroes is about the same as the difference between war and a social media filter. And with that, we conclude this edition of Break the Fake. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.